Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Everyday English Channel with Tom and Kate. We're really happy to have you with us today.
Yes, thanks for being here again. And honestly, today's topic is something that many people find stressful, even in their own language. Airports. There's always a lot happening at the same time. People are checking screens, looking for gates, carrying luggage, listening to announcements, and trying not to miss their flight.
That's true. Airports are busy places, and conversations there are usually very practical and direct. People ask short questions, give quick information, and move constantly from one place to another. And actually, airport English is very repetitive. The same questions and expressions come back all the time, which makes it a very good topic for learners.
Yes, and I think many people become nervous because they feel they need perfect English at the airport, especially when traveling internationally. But honestly, most airport conversations are very simple. You usually just answer questions, ask for directions, or confirm information. And before we continue, if you enjoy these calm and practical English conversations, you can subscribe to the channel or share this episode with someone who is learning English. It really helps us, and we really appreciate it.
So let me ask you something. Are you someone who likes airports, or do they stress you out?
Honestly, I have mixed feelings about them. I like the idea of traveling, but I don't really enjoy the airport part itself. I always worry a little about being late, finding the correct gate, or forgetting something important. So when I travel, I usually arrive very early because I prefer having extra time instead of rushing. And actually, rushing is a very useful word in travel conversations. People often say, "I hate rushing at the airport," or "We had to rush to the gate."
I'm almost the opposite. I actually enjoy airports when everything is organized properly. I like arriving early, checking the information calmly, and having time before boarding. For me, the stressful part is when things become unpredictable. Delays, cancellations, or long security lines can quickly change the atmosphere. And boarding is another important word because people hear it constantly at airports. You hear announcements like, "Boarding will begin in 10 minutes," or "Passengers are now boarding."
Yes, airport announcements are everywhere, and at first they can feel difficult to understand because they often speak quickly, but the vocabulary itself is usually simple. You constantly hear words like gate, passport, security, departure, and boarding pass.
Another thing people say a lot at airports is, "Where's the check-in desk?" or "Where do I drop my luggage?" These are very practical questions, and they come up immediately when people arrive at the airport.
And actually, drop off your luggage is a useful expression because native speakers use it naturally. Someone might say, "I already dropped off my suitcase," meaning the luggage is already checked in and ready for the flight.
Something else I've noticed is that people become much more polite when speaking to airport staff. They often start with expressions like, "Excuse me," or "Could you help me?" because they need information quickly and clearly.
Yes, especially when they're confused or lost. Airports can be stressful environments, so people ask for help constantly. Someone might say, "Excuse me, where's gate 24?" or "Could you tell me where security is?" And honestly, "Could you tell me where" is one of the most useful structures for traveling in English.
Another thing that happens a lot is people checking documents repeatedly. At almost every step, someone asks for your passport or boarding pass, so you constantly hear expressions like, "Can I see your passport?" or "Do you have your boarding pass?"
Yes, and travelers themselves also ask questions constantly because they want reassurance. They say things like, "Is this the right line?" or "Is this flight on time?" or "Has boarding started yet?" These are small questions, but they happen all the time in real airport situations.
And what's interesting is that even though airports feel stressful, most conversations there are actually very short and simple.
Yes, the difficulty is usually the situation itself, not the English.
One of the first real interactions people usually have at the airport is at the check-in desk. And honestly, the conversation is often very short and repetitive. The staff member usually starts with something like, "Can I see your passport, please?" or "Where are you flying today?" Then they check your booking, weigh your luggage, and ask a few practical questions. In my case, I like preparing everything before reaching the desk. I already have my passport, boarding pass, and documents ready because I hate searching for things at the last second while people are waiting behind me.
I'm less organized than you, honestly. I always think I'm ready, and then suddenly I can't find my passport because it's in the wrong pocket or inside another bag. And I think that creates situations many travelers recognize immediately. You see people opening bags quickly, checking pockets, looking stressed, while the employee waits politely in front of them. That's why expressions like, "just a second," or "I know it's here somewhere" are very common at airports.
Yes, and another thing staff often ask is whether you have luggage to check in. They might say, "Do you have any bags to check?" or "Are you checking in luggage today?" Those questions come up constantly during airport conversations, and then people answer with very simple information. They say things like, "Just this suitcase," or "Only hand luggage."
Hand luggage is another very useful expression because travelers hear it all the time. Sometimes people also say carry-on bag, especially in American English. And honestly, luggage vocabulary becomes very repetitive once you travel a few times. You constantly hear words like suitcase, backpack, carry-on, bag drop, or overweight luggage.
Yes, and overweight luggage is something people really don't want to hear. Because if the suitcase is too heavy, the conversation suddenly becomes stressful very quickly. Someone might hear, "Your bag is over the weight limit," and immediately start removing clothes or moving things from one bag to another right there in the airport.
I've actually seen that happen many times. People suddenly opening their suitcase in the middle of the airport, trying to move shoes or jackets into another bag while looking completely stressed. And honestly, airports are full of those little stressful moments. That's why people often ask practical questions repeatedly, just to feel reassured. They ask things like, "Is this the correct gate?" Or, "How long does security take?" Or, "Do we need to board now?"
Another big part of the airport experience is security control. And I think that's where many people become nervous because there are many instructions happening quickly at the same time. Staff members usually speak very directly there. They say things like, "Please remove your jacket," or "Take your laptop out of your bag," or "Empty your pockets."
Yes, security conversations are usually short because everything needs to move quickly. People don't have long discussions there. They mostly listen carefully and follow instructions. And actually, "empty your pockets" is a useful expression outside airports too. It simply means removing everything from your pockets before passing security.
Another thing travelers worry about is understanding announcements. Sometimes airports are noisy, and announcements can sound unclear, especially after a long trip or an early morning flight. That's why people often stop and check the information screens again, even if they already looked before.
Yes, because people are always afraid of missing something important. I think almost everybody has looked at the departure screen 5 times even though the gate number didn't change. And actually, departure board or information screen are useful expressions because people use them naturally while traveling.
Something else that happens constantly is people asking for directions inside the airport. Someone might say, "Excuse me, where's Terminal 2?" or "How do I get to Gate 18?" And most answers are also very simple. People reply with things like, "Go straight ahead," or "Take the escalator," or "It's on the second floor."
Yes, airport English is actually very practical English. Nobody is trying to sound advanced or impressive. People just want clear information quickly because everybody is focused on catching their flight and getting to the right place on time.
Another situation that creates a lot of conversation at airports is when flights are delayed. And honestly, I think almost everybody has experienced that at least once. People suddenly look at the screen, realize the departure time changed, and immediately start asking questions. You hear things like, "Do you know what's happening?" Or "How long is the delay?" Or "Did they announce anything?" And actually, delay is one of the most important travel words because people hear it constantly in airports.
Yes, and delays completely change the atmosphere at the airport. At first, everybody is calm and focused on boarding. Then suddenly, one announcement changes everything and people become stressed, frustrated, or tired very quickly. And I think travelers often start talking to strangers more during delays because everyone is sharing the same situation. Someone might say, "Looks like we'll be here for a while," or "I hope we don't miss the connection."
Miss the connection is another very useful expression, especially for international travel. It means missing the next flight because the first flight arrived too late. And honestly, connecting flights sounds stressful even to me. I prefer direct flights whenever possible because I like simpler travel plans.
I agree with you there. Running through a huge airport trying to catch another flight sounds terrible, and airports become much more stressful when people are in a hurry. You suddenly see travelers walking extremely fast, checking their phones constantly, or asking airport staff questions every 2 minutes. That's when expressions like, "We're running late," or "I think we're going to miss boarding," become very common.
Another interesting thing is how people behave while waiting at airports. Some people stay very organized. They sit quietly, charge their phone, read something, or watch the departure screen carefully. Others look completely lost after 10 minutes and start walking around the airport without really knowing what to do.
I'm definitely someone who walks around too much at airports. I always think I have plenty of time, and then suddenly, I realize boarding starts in 15 minutes and I'm still looking at shops or buying coffee somewhere far from the gate. And actually, airports create a lot of small, everyday conversations around food and shopping, too. People ask things like, "Do you want anything from the cafe?" Or "Should we grab something to eat before boarding?"
Yes, because airports often involve a lot of waiting. And when people wait, they usually eat, drink coffee, charge devices, or check messages repeatedly. Another thing travelers ask constantly is whether there's free Wi-Fi. Someone always says, "What's the Wi-Fi password?" Or, "Does this airport have free internet?"
That's true. And honestly, watching people search desperately for a charger at the airport is almost part of the travel experience now. People suddenly realize their battery is at 10% and immediately become stressed. That's why expressions like, "My phone is about to die," or "Do you have a charger?" are extremely common while traveling.
Another thing that happens often is boarding the plane itself. People usually stand up and form a line immediately after the boarding announcement, even when boarding hasn't fully started yet. And honestly, that creates funny situations because everybody suddenly wants to be first, even though the plane will leave at the same time for everyone.
Yes, and boarding lines are always interesting to watch. Some people stay very calm and wait comfortably, while others stand near the gate 20 minutes early because they're afraid of missing something. And during boarding, staff repeat the same expressions constantly. They say things like, "Please have your boarding pass ready," or "You may board now."
Another thing travelers often worry about is finding the correct seat once they enter the plane. You immediately hear conversations like, "Excuse me, I think that's my seat," or "Could you let me through?" These are very small interactions, but they happen on almost every flight.
And what's interesting is that all these airport and travel conversations use very practical English. People are not speaking in long, complicated sentences. They're asking questions, checking information, solving small problems, and reacting to situations in real time. And honestly, that's why airport English is so useful to practice.
When you look at all these situations together, you realize that airports create many small conversations all the time. Some are with airport staff, some are with travel companions, and sometimes even with complete strangers. And what's interesting is that the English used is usually very practical. People ask questions, confirm information, solve problems, or react to situations happening around them. In my case, I try to keep airport conversations calm and organized because traveling already creates enough stress by itself. So I naturally use expressions like, "Let's double check the gate," or "We still have time," because I prefer staying ahead of the situation instead of rushing at the last minute.
I'm probably less calm than you when traveling, honestly. I always think everything will be fine, and then suddenly I realize I forgot to check something important. Maybe the boarding gate changed. Maybe I packed too much liquid in my bag. Or maybe I underestimated how long security would take. And I think many travelers recognize that feeling. Airports often create small moments of panic even when everything is technically under control.
That's true. And another thing people experience a lot while traveling is tiredness. Flights are often early in the morning or late at night, and airports can quickly become exhausting. You hear people say things like, "I barely slept," or "I'm exhausted," or "I need coffee before boarding." Those expressions are very common because traveling affects energy levels so much.
Yes, especially after long flights or time zone changes. And actually, airports are one of the few places where people happily pay too much money for coffee just because they're tired and waiting for a flight. I think everybody has had that moment where they sit near the gate drinking coffee while constantly checking the departure screen every 5 minutes.
Another thing I've noticed is how people immediately start sharing travel stories when airports become part of the conversation. Someone mentions a delayed flight, and suddenly another person says, "That happened to me last year," or "I once missed a connection because of weather." Travel conversations naturally create storytelling because almost everybody has experienced stressful or funny situations while flying.
Yes, and those stories usually involve something unexpected, lost luggage, boarding the wrong gate, forgetting a passport, sleeping through an announcement, or arriving at the airport too late. Airports are full of situations people remember for years afterwards. And honestly, even experienced travelers still make mistakes sometimes.
That's very true. Traveling doesn't automatically become stress-free just because you've done it many times before. But I think experience changes the way people react. The more you travel, the more you realize that small problems happen constantly at airports, and most of them eventually get solved. That's why experienced travelers often stay calmer during delays or long waiting times.
Yes, beginners often think every small problem is a disaster, while experienced travelers usually think, okay, this is annoying, but we'll figure it out. And honestly, that mindset probably makes traveling much easier psychologically.
Another thing I find interesting is that airports are extremely international places. You hear different languages everywhere, people from different countries asking the same questions, and everyone trying to navigate the same system at the same time. And because of that, airport English becomes very universal. The vocabulary is usually simple, clear, and repetitive so that people from many countries can understand it easily.
Yes, and I think that's why airport conversations are such good practice for English learners. You don't need advanced vocabulary or perfect grammar. Most situations are based on practical communication. You ask where something is, confirm information, explain a problem, or react to an announcement. And honestly, once you become comfortable with those situations, traveling feels much less stressful.
Before we finish, thank you very much for spending this time with us today.
We hope this conversation helps you feel more comfortable speaking English at the airport and while traveling in real-life situations.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe to the channel or share it with someone who is learning English.
It really helps us grow, and we truly appreciate your support.
Join us in the next episode for another calm and practical English conversation.
Thanks again for listening.
And remember, keep speaking English every day.